Hi everyone! Thanks again for joining me in a video. Today I'm going to go over 12 things I wish I knew before I became an author illustrator. I tried to narrow it down to 10, but I really couldn't. Each one of these points is super important that I really wish I knew before I jumped into this field of work. So come on and join me and let's get started. Okay, number 1, publishing is slow. Like a lot slower than most people realize. It takes at least a year from the time that you turn in your work before it becomes a published book. Sometimes it's a little less depending on the publisher, but usually it's about a year. They need that time to market the book, they need that time to print the book, make sure the color's right, and it's distributed to all the stockists around the country or the world depending on your book. Another thing about publishing is so slow is responses are slow. So I'm talking about when you're sending an email to your editor or an art director. Don't expect a response back that week. Don't expect a response back the next week. Give it like a month, maybe 2. For some reason in publishing, they just feel like taking their time when they want to respond to you. Part of it is they want to, go over your issue or your question that you have, and they want to go over it with, maybe somebody else in their office, and before they get back to you. Totally cool. But it just takes a lot longer than in any other profession. Another thing about publishing is payment can be slow. So even if your contract says, yeah, you'll be paid within 30 days, don't necessarily expect that. I've had some payments take, 2 or 3 months after that. I even got paid once a year later than I was supposed to, which really sucked. Another thing that's slow about publishing is, for some reason, publishers and everyone that works with publishers decides to take August and maybe September off. Don't know why, they just do. So it's August and September is not a great time to be in contact with your publisher. Don't expect any response back. You can always ask your publisher if they're going to be around, just to make sure that your emails will be answered, or they'll be seen, rather than when they come back from vacation and they have a million of them. And the last thing that makes publishing really slow is sometimes they give you more time than you need to work on a project, which just kind of elongates the whole process. So what I mean by this is sometimes they'll give you a year or sometimes 2 just to make the artwork for a book, which is great. You have a whole year, but sometimes you don't need that whole time. So you're going to need to find some other projects in the meantime to kind of fill up that spot just to make up that time. Okay, let's go on with number 2. Agents, they're worth their cost. So I know everyone's like, ooh, should I really get an agent? It's going to cost me more. Like, they're going to take a cut of what I make. And in my opinion, they're definitely worth what they're, whatever percentage that they take. Usually it's about 15%. Sometimes it can be a little bit more if they're an illustration rep, not just a literary rep. So what's so great about an agent is that they will negotiate for you, so they can usually get you more money than what is originally offered, which is awesome. In my experience, that usually pays for that 15%. So you get more money than you would almost for free. It's great. Doesn't always happen though. Another great thing about agents is that they'll go over your contracts for you. So a lot of contracts, are written in lawyerese, and you're just like, I don't even know what this is saying. This sentence has been going on for this really long paragraph, and there's a lot of words in there. So they'll go over that for you, and they'll, again, negotiate with the publisher. And the last thing that, the reason why agents are great is that they can be a sounding board for your projects. So this isn't always the case with every agent. My agent does this where if I have an idea for a book, I can just send him off an email being like, hey, I have an idea for this book. It's about X, Y, or Z. and he'll email me back and be like, there's a lot of books, like that already on the market, or he'll be like, that sounds great, go for it. And he'll help me out throughout that writing process. So from that whole idea to submission process, he'll, look over my work and help make sure it's the best it can be before it lands its way in front of editors. Speaking of editors, agents are also great because they get your work in front of the right editor. So before I had my agent, I was just sending off my work to the very few contacts I had within the industry. And who knows, maybe that was the right person to send my work to. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe they weren't looking for a book about, X. Maybe they were looking for a book about Y, and I didn't know that. But there was another publisher that was looking for a book about X. I don't know that information, but my agent does. So that's another reason why agents are great. Number 3, have a side gig to start. When I was starting my writing and illustration journey, especially towards the beginning, I wasn't really making that much money. So I had a bunch of side gigs to start. Some of them were part-time jobs. Some of them were a little bit kind of more one-off things. Examples of some odd jobs I did was that I was a TV extra. I worked at a running shoe store part-time for 3 years. I was a curling instructor, like curling that you see on the TV. I also had my Etsy shop, and I did a little bit of product development testing, and I also worked at a visual effects company for a little bit. So as you can see, I've did a whole bunch of, odd jobs here and there until I was able to make the leap into full-time illustrating, which has been wonderful. But, it's something that I wish I knew going into this was that, you need to have another income stream. Number 4, it'll probably take years before you get your first book project. Some people get lucky and they get their first project, within the first year that they have been trying to be an author illustrator. I was one of those lucky people, but I know some people in the industry that have been working for years before they got their first book project. So just expect that, it can take a wide variety of time. It just depends on, the right publisher at the right time with the right book. It's a little bit tricky to try and land that, but once you do, it'll be a lot easier to get your second book. Number 5, learning the craft of writing and illustrating can be tough. There is a big learning curve. So some people think, writing picture books must be easy. There aren't that much words. It can't be that hard, right? And it actually takes a lot of learning to, do it right. So you have to learn pacing, you have to learn the correct number of words, you have to learn new lingo like gutter, or, what's the difference between an editor and art director. I'm gonna have some links below in the description to help, you learn all this. And there's also things that you have to learn that are unique to picture book writing, such as page turns. Number 6, don't write and rhyme, and don't have an overly preachy book. So writing and rhyme is really hard. It's a lot harder than people realize. Some people think, it's just because, the last word rhymes, it's a rhyming book. And when you actually read a really good rhyming book, you're going to see that there's a bunch of beat patterns in all of the lines. And learning this is really, really hard. I don't write and rhyme. Most publishers actually aren't looking for rhyming books. If you look at most of the books that are being sold today, the majority of them aren't being in rhyme. And when you are pitching a rhyming book to a publisher, they're going to ask you why this book is rhyming, and that can be a little bit hard to justify. And with the overly preachy books, publishers aren't looking for books that have morals to the story or outright lessons. They're more looking for character-driven books where we have a main character or more, and we're just seeing how this character reacts to certain situations in their world. And there can be an underlying lesson or moral, but it's not like overly preachy, if that makes sense. Number 7, you're gonna have to find time for a critique group or 2. I usually have 2 critique groups going on at once, and it does take a little bit of time to carve out into my schedule to make sure that, I have the amount of time I need to read their manuscripts and critique them, and also for meetings. And critique groups are so important. It's where you learn, it's where you get feedback from your work. I can't overstate how important critique groups are. Again, I'm gonna post some links in the description to help you find one. Number 8, query letters follow a specific form. So this took me a long time to learn. I didn't realize until after I had been sending out quite a bit of query letters before I wasn't following the right format. So the first paragraph, which is only 1 to 2 sentences, is going to say why you chose this agent or why you're choosing this publisher. So you can be like, I read an interview about, this agent, and that's why I'm interested in working with you. It sounds like, we would get along. Paragraph 2 is all about the pitch. So think of it as a book jacket, but just condensed to 2 or 3 sentences. It can be really hard to perfect this, so I would suggest working on this with your critique group. Number 3, the third paragraph, is going to be your publishing history, if you have any of that. If you don't, you're just going to skip that. Number 4 is going to be your memberships and where to find your work. So memberships would be something like the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, or any other organization that's similar to that. And where to find your work, that's going to be usually your website. So again, I recommend having a website over than just having something like an Instagram or something. You can get a free website through Wix or a few other hosts. I personally use Squarespace, but that costs money. But there's no excuse not to have a website. Number 9, expect tons of rejection letters. I have received tons of rejection letters before I get a publisher to say yes. And even the most famous authors and illustrators you can think of, they receive tons of rejection letters too. It's just something that you're gonna have to get used to. And it's nothing personal. It's just really all about the work. I actually have a collection of my rejection letters. It just reminds me that I'm getting the no's out of the way before I get to that one yes. Number 10, everybody will expect a free book from you. People don't realize that as an author or illustrator, you don't get an unlimited amount of your book. You only get around, I'd say maybe 10 to 20. It really depends on your contract. I usually set these aside for when an organization is looking for a donation. So I actually don't even give out my books to people. I always just tell them, if you really want to support me, you'll buy my book and leave a review for it. But a lot of people will expect, oh, hey, you're an author. You have tons of your book, just give it to me for free. And no, that's not the case for me, at least. I hold on to my author copies because I'm gonna be using them for giveaways or, again, donations to a good cause. And people will also expect free school visits too. If you're an established author or illustrator, I wouldn't do any free school visits. If it's your first school visit, or maybe even your second, or you're working out a new presentation, I'd say in that case it's okay to do a free presentation as long as you're getting some good feedback about your presentation. But when you're an established author illustrator, I'd say make sure you charge for those school visits, because that's a lot of time and money out of your schedule when you could be working. Number 11, everyone will tell you their book idea. So whenever you introduce yourself as a children's book author or illustrator, everyone is going to tell you their idea for a picture book. Apparently it's something people think about all the time, is like, I think I'm going to write a picture book someday. I have this awesome idea. Usually I just smile and nod and just let them know a few tips on how to get started in the industry if they're interested. But it's just something you're going to have to get used to if you're going to be in this field of work. And last but not least, number 12, you're probably not going to be rich. So yes, some picture books make lots of money and sell hundreds of thousands of copies. Most picture books don't. Most picture books don't even earn out their advance. So this means that you, as an author or illustrator, get an advance against your royalties. So what that means is you basically get an upfront payment. It's almost kind of like a debt, but you don't have to pay back. So when you get your royalties, you have to first earn that amount of the advance before you get any royalties from that book. So most books don't earn out, which is when you finally start seeing some checks in the mail after you finally reach that big advance that they send you. So most books that doesn't happen to, and so you won't be getting residual income most of the time. I hope you enjoyed the top 12 things I wish I knew before I became an author illustrator. If you liked this video, it would mean a lot to me if you liked the video or even subscribed. It means a lot to this little channel of mine, and I hope to see you in my next video. See you then.